not only is he obviously a very skillful in his own way, but he is massive in terms of not in height, but just in his build. He's so strong. And I've seen this comparison thrown around for a while now, but I definitely was one of the first to say this, so make sure you remember that he's very similar to Adriano, who obviously is one of Brazil's kind of legendary players, who's left-footed, powerful, but really nice footwork as well. And I think that is something that Rayan has shown in his young career so far. Hello everybody, welcome back to The Hidden Game by Beyond 90. Today I am joined by data genius Spencer once again. If you are enjoying these videos, please make sure you do subscribe. But today, Spencer, who are we going to be exploring?
Rayan from Bournemouth, the player with just now 2 caps for the team, but he's already made a pretty big impact, so really excited to speak about him.
He's going to obviously have his sort of breakout at Bournemouth initially as a wide player, but I have always seen his long-term future as a number 9, so I think that's something we can explore. But yeah, let's speak about kind of what the data says, because obviously he's only had 2 appearances so far. He's impressed in both of them. One of them was a sub appearance, one of them was a start, I believe, and he's kind of made that Semenyo transfer seem a bit seamless in terms of replacing. So yeah, let's get into the data.
Yeah, and sorry if I say his name wrong. I don't know. I don't know how it's pronounced. I go with what the announcers say, or I go with what it looks like. But yeah, so you mentioned that his final trajectory is probably more as a center forward than a winger, and I 100% agree. This is his pizza chart from his final season in Brazil, so not including any of the data from the past couple games where he's played in Bournemouth. You'll notice the big standout traits, things that are very center forward-y, XG and shots. He takes a lot of those. Really, his creative bag probably needs some improvement, and maybe like in watching him, the elements are there, but the overall volume of production is definitely not there. Even the things that you would normally see from a winger that would make you really excited about the way that they would translate to the next level as a winger, like a traditional winger, that stuff's not there either. Progressive running, so carrying in space, dribbling, drawing fouls, even the rate at which he dribbles, like on a per touch basis, is low. So one of the thoughts that I had was, well, when he played for Vasco, they were relegation threatened, I believe. I don't think they were actually relegated, but they were pretty far down the table. Didn't see a ton of possession, not a very fluid side, so that probably impacted a lot of the counting stats that he would have. But what dribble rate is the stat that I made up, but it's the number of dribbles that a player attempts per pass received. So you get a better idea of like, well, if a player's not as involved on the ball, that would influence their volume of production. For him, his dribble rate matches his dribble success and dribble attempts. It was pretty poor in Brazil by the standards of like historical Brazilian talents and stuff. The sample of this being, you can see it at the bottom when the thing goes away. You can see there at the bottom the sample group is U21 wingers in Brazil over like the past 7 or 8 seasons. So within that sample, it wasn't actually all that impressive on the ball, but one more thing that he was really impressive with, which kind of harkens back to the center forward arc, and as well goes back to the discussion that we had in the Boati video about like how can you identify a player that's going to physically translate to the next level? Aerial duels. Guess what Rayan was really good at? He won a lot of aerial duels. He's physically ready. And yeah, that being one of the best indicators for readiness for a league like the Premier League, I mean, yeah, here's another example of it.
So yeah, Spencer in the last episode, the episode before, highlighted that aerial duels is the best predictor of a player being able to cope physically if they can win aerial duels at a young age. That is a really interesting way of basically predicting that they're going to be able to handle the big leagues, basically. I think really interesting thing about Rayan, and I don't know how many of his minutes at Vasco came as a number 9, because I know he played wide at times and he also played as a number 9, so that might obviously dictate some of the numbers being low for progressive runs, etc. But I do think when I see him and I see his build, he is built like a traditional number 9. What's really interesting is that the Premier League now, I think the fact that he's kind of come in so seamlessly is such a big sign how important it is to be physically and athletically ready in the Premier League. And if you've got that to a certain level, then you are on the right track, because Rayan, not only is he obviously a very skillful in his own way, but he is massive in terms of not in height, but just in his build. He's so strong. And I've seen this comparison thrown around for a while now, but I definitely was one of the first to say this, so make sure you remember that he's very similar to Adriano, who obviously is one of Brazil's kind of legendary players, who's left-footed, powerful, but really nice footwork as well. And I think that is something that Rayan has shown in his young career so far. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean I think for the number of reasons besides just the physicality being probably more apt to being a center forward than a winger, his ability to shoot, which we'll get onto more later. Like he's actually like a pretty good finisher, I think. A number of different things. Yeah, I think probably one of those center forward with like kind of winger tendencies is probably where he's going to end up. But also, like if he stays at Bournemouth and he continues to develop at Bournemouth, they did a similar thing with Semenyo, where he was more of a center forward, if I recall, when he was coming out of the lower leagues in England, and they took him and they kind of sent him more out wide as a winger. The parallels between the two being really big, physical wingers, and center forward, a hybrid. So yeah, definitely a lot of parallels between him and Adriano, and then obviously with the guy that he's come in to replace, Semenyo. One of the other things, and you're not going to see Semenyo on this one because this is just comparing U23 wingers. So this is U23 wingers. This is top 5 leagues and Brazil, just so that I could get Rayan on the graph. This is on a per pass received basis. So you can see he's right around the median line for dribbles per pass received, and then as well for like end product type activities, shots and shot assists. This would be the median line here. He is way up here. So on a per touch basis, he was really efficient in terms of getting off shots and finding teammates for Vasco, which I guess kind of a bit of a lesson. There's one school of thought to where, well, if a player is good and they're young, they will just simply find a way to earn shots and earn activities, even if they're in a worse side, because they're in a lower league, and if they're good enough to be playing in a higher league, they're just going to make it happen. But you do also need to take team context into data, because, I mean, unless you're like doing things on a possession adjusted basis, which you could, but even then, it's still really not baking in all of the things that you want to see. There's always still a lot more context that's needed around the data. So looking at something like this, you look at the previous graph, you're like, wow, this is, I mean, he gets a lot of shots, but like this isn't really a very, very strong, very complete winger. But when you look at it from on a per pass received basis, a lot of the stuff looks a lot better. And then, of course, the things that he does well, he looks phenomenal at.
Yeah, and if I just share my screen quickly, and we can just discuss this a little bit on the tactics board. Hold on a second. Yeah, so I think that what you said about him kind of playing in that wide role, it really does, I think, suit someone, especially at his age, who's able to get off shots, because you're always just going to have more time to get those shots off. I think at the moment, especially in the Premier League, teams are so frightened of kind of this area here, and so that area is always so packed out. But if you're able to get a shooter like Rayan into wide areas, who can then cut in into these types of areas and then get that shooting opportunity, that's probably going to be more effective than having someone where it's so tight and packed, where maybe he won't be able to get those shots off, especially in the Premier League where defensive structures are so good. I think you saw with his first goal how he was able to travel in from the wide areas, obviously a very powerful carrier, and then he's great shooting off both feet. He's left-footed, of course, but he scored like a very interesting technique type finish. So I think that's really, really like the way to maximize him at this point, I think, from those wide areas, despite him kind of having the build of a traditional 9. The other thing I was going to say is, we all know that at the moment the Premier League is such a transitional league. Teams are, it's becoming very end-to-end type football. There's a lot of kind of stuff going on in the middle, and then teams trying to get into the space in behind. And I think Rayan, when you look at his build, he is just made for the Premier League. The powerfulness, the the carrying ability in transition, but also being that effective final third player, like we discussed, in terms of doesn't matter how kind of little the ball he gets, he will make things happen when he receives it. And when games are so tight in the Premier League now, you want someone who's going to make things count. And when it gets into the final third, they're going to get final actions off, whether that's a shot, whether that's a pass. He is someone that maximizes every opportunity he gets in the final third in terms of trying to get output from it. So I think he is a match made in heaven for the Premier League. And yeah, I think Bournemouth recruitment. I mean, you can't ever doubt their recruitment. It's been spot on for so long. Probably taken over from Brighton in terms of the best recruitment in the league.
Yeah, I mean, this is I'm just now realizing this is the second time we've talked about a Bournemouth player in 3 episodes. So yeah, I think that tells you all you need to know about their recruitment, or at least our feelings toward it. I think they've probably taken over the top spot as most respected. One of the I guess I'm particularly proud of this graph, but it really addresses a lot of the stuff about how he's best enabled and best platformed when he's able to like run in space and then also find shots, because he's a really good finisher, at least within the sample that he's had. In Brazil, he had like the perfect alignment. I'm trying to think of a better word to describe it. I should probably find like a phrase because I refer to it a lot. But the fact that his goals exceeded his expected goals on target, which exceeded his expected goals, meaning that he had, let's say he had 10 goals, 12 expected goals on target, and 15 goals. That means the placement of his shots exceeded the chances, and the actual quality of the finish, maybe that be the power, the technique, whatever it was, exceeded the placement of the shot. So that's like what you would want to see. That's ideal for a goal scorer. So he had that as well. If you look at this, it kind of loosely describes finishing, but on this axis here, you have the quality of shot. So better quality shot over here, worse quality shot over here. On this axis, you have shot on target rate. So those things being correlated because better shots are closer, you're more likely to hit the target. And then it broken it down into the different quadrants. So you have players like Bradley Barcola, which find good shots and hit the target. Then you have players that find good shots but don't hit the target, like Alejandro Garnacho. You have players that don't really hit the target and also don't take a ton of great shots. Nusa does a lot of other good things, but so far he's not been particularly great at that. And then you have a number of players up here that don't necessarily find the best quality shots from an XG perspective, but hit the target a lot, which shows a high level of skill. You can see the names that Rayan is surrounded by. Kevin, who had that magnificent goal against United a couple of weeks ago. Morgan Rogers, very widely regarded as one of the best finishers and one of the better ball strikers in the Premier League. And then Lamine Yamal, probably the best player in world football, if not one of the top couple. And just when people describe generational, right, that word's tossed around too much, but it applies to Lamine Yamal. That's the kind of territory that Rayan is in for this type of a level of the shots that he takes versus the quality of finish that he has.
Yeah, and I think just to finish on that, I think this is such a big thing. We spoke about it with the Krupi video. Teams are limiting high quality chances much more in the Premier League now, and so these kind of players who can break those XG expectancies are a bit of a cheat code. Morgan Rogers, we've seen it countless times. He's shot Aston Villa up the table, and Rayan has the potential with his shot quality in terms of no backlift, power, a bit like Krupi, to be honest, in the way he can strike a ball off both feet. I think that can turn any game in his favour. So, Spencer, thanks for introducing Rayan to us. Guys, please do subscribe. Make sure you comment down below who you want to see next, and we will see you next time.